Today marks the 15th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, in which nearly 3,000 people died. A commemorative ceremony was held at the Ground Zero of the World Trade Center site. Just one day before the anniversary, the US Department of State warned American citizens that the possibility of terrorist attacks continues to exist throughout the world. Earlier today, the US ambassador to Israel held a 9/11 ceremony in Jerusalem. Despite the increased security measures set to deal with potential attacks, security vulnerabilities remain. This is true as many still feel the US is unsafe. According to a Gallup poll in March, 48% of Americans surveyed were completely worried about the possibility over a future attack.
I think that the possibility of small-scale terrorist attacks is ever present, everywhere in the country.
I think ISIS is always a threat to the West, particularly Europe, but the United States as well.
I mean, I think, unfortunately, terrorist attacks have been sort of a thing of our time. It's something that's unpredictable.
In Europe, it's been the summer of mourning. On June 28th, 45 were killed at Istanbul's main international airport. Then, on July 14th, 86 are plowed down in Nice, France. In the coming days and weeks, an 85-year-old priest would be murdered inside a church in Normandy, France. 5 would be stabbed on a train in southern Germany. And a suicide bomber would blow himself up outside a music festival here in the German city of Ansbach. All attacks are blamed on ISIL or people inspired by ISIL.
I think the mood is definitely one of concern, if not fear.
But security experts say European Union lawmakers have passed crucial laws, like a tracking program to spot those coming and going from Syria. Still, though, they say more needs to be done on both a European and global level.
There is still a culture within the intelligence services to not cooperate as much as they should.
Security analysts say those issues must be overcome to prevent attacks. Many on the continent will tell you it now feels like a new era for Europe. Military units remain on patrol throughout the large cities. London just recently added 600 armed officers. With ISIL continuing to call for its followers to attack, this is the new normal.
This is a challenge that Europe has never seen before, at least at this kind of level.
A 15-year-old boy has been arrested in Paris on suspicion of preparing what's described as an imminent violent action. It's the second alleged plot understood to have links to the so-called Islamic State, discovered in France in a week. The boy had reportedly been under house arrest since a state of emergency was declared after the November attacks in the capital. France is on high alert.
Nous avons sur notre propre territoire 1350.
On our territory, we have 1,350 people under investigation who today are in prison, says the Prime Minister. 293 of those have a direct link to terrorist groups. There are about 15,000 people in France who are being monitored because these people are in the process of radicalization.
Well, players and coaches for the Seattle Seahawks stood with their arms interlocked today during the national anthem. It was meant as a show of unity and a follow-up to protest that started with 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick. At a church in San Francisco, people wore Kaepernick jerseys to back his call for racial equality.
And we're going to stand with this young man all the way.
Dr. Amos Brown, the pastor of the Third Baptist Church of San Francisco, encouraged members to wear their number 7 Colin Kaepernick jerseys Sunday morning.
We will go down and this is what Kaepernick did to say we still have miles to go.
Church members kneeling, showing solidarity with the quarterback and his silent protest of the national anthem, asking for social justice. Cornerback Marcus Peters of the Chiefs also showing support for Kaepernick and his cause. Peters raised his fist during the national anthem, which held more significance today, the 15th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. In San Francisco, fans watching season openers had mixed reactions.
It's everyone's right to say what they want to say, and it's freedom of speech. But there's a part of me that I'm a 5th grade teacher, and I teach American history, so I'm very patriotic.
There's a lot of struggle out there right now for a lot of people that feel oppressed, and him being the voice of it and the other players coming out and just show them what they're made of, and not letting him be like the only Lone Ranger out there. That's a good thing.
Oh, say, can you see?
While the protests are drawing harsh criticism from many, Pastor Brown hopes this will start a new dialogue about race and equality.
This effort is not a sprint. It's a continuation of a marathon for justice.
And as for the Third Baptist Church, the pastor says the congregation's show of solidarity with Kaepernick isn't just for today. They plan to show support for the entirety of the season.
The world's most powerful navies, that of the United States, Russia, and China, are set to begin large-scale exercises in Asia starting Monday. China and Russia will hold their joint maneuvers in the South China Sea, while the U.S. drill will take place near Guam in the Western Pacific. China has called the drill with Russia a routine exercise to deepen military cooperation. All three powers have made a point to steer clear of each other, but analysts say there are clear undertones of countering the influence of the United States in the region, where Beijing has territorial disputes with its neighbors. According to China's defense ministry, the exercise will include, among other activities, quote, island taking. U.S. drill, named Valiant Shield, will involve 180 aircraft and some 18,000 personnel, led by the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan, based out of Japan.
Starting from 2012, the first China-Russia joint sea exercise was held in China's northern waters of the Yellow Sea, and the following year they took place in the waters near the Russian city of Vladivostok. The Chinese Navy assembled its largest number of seamen ever for that drill, and in 2014, the third joint sea drill was held in the north of the East China Sea, where vessels from the navies mixed together for the first time. And in 2015, two drills were held. One was in the Mediterranean Sea in May for open sea navigation safety, and the other was conducted in August in the Sea of Japan, where the countries held their first combined landing operation.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea says the United States must recognize it as a legitimate nuclear weapon state. Now, this comes after Pyongyang's fifth and largest nuclear test. The DPRK also says a push for further sanction is laughable and has vowed to continue to strengthen its nuclear power.
I say this is a slap in the face at America, and you say what?
I think we've come to the point now where our enemies no longer respect or fear us. Our allies no longer trust us, and we need to have some serious consequences here.
The world is still processing the implications of North Korea's fifth nuclear test, but speculations are brewing that Pyongyang could conduct yet another one before the year is out.
North Korea has reportedly completed preparations for another nuclear test. Multiple sources within the South Korean government said Monday that South Korea and U.S. intelligence authorities are keeping a close eye on the possibility Pyongyang may push the button on its sixth test at the third unused portal of its Punggye-ri test site. 4 nuclear tests have been conducted at the first and second portal. The fifth test on Friday was conducted some 500 meters away from the fourth test. Seoul and Washington have evaluated that the North will most likely forge ahead with another nuclear provocation before the end of the year, as it vowed to continue its nuclear development when it announced last Friday's test. South Korea's defense minister also noted that the North is ready to conduct a nuclear test at one of its 3 portals.
The South Korean military has devised an operation plan that could, quote, wipe Pyongyang off the map in the event of conflict. It involves preemptive bombing when signs of an imminent nuclear attack are detected.
According to a military source on Sunday, South Korea's defense ministry has reported its plan, dubbed Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation to the National Assembly. The concept is to launch preemptive bomb strikes on a certain area of Pyongyang, targeting Kim Jong-un and the military leadership if the regime shows signs of using its nuclear weapons. The South would use high explosive shells as well as its homegrown ballistic missiles, including the Hyunmoo 2A, 2B and 3, which have respective ranges of 300, 500 and 1,000 kilometers. The military aims to complete launch testing by the end of next year and expand the Hyunmoo lineup. Also, as a show of force against the North, South Korea and the United States will conduct joint naval exercises next month to simulate the targeting of major military facilities in the event of war. The US will deploy the USS Ronald Reagan, the flagship of one of its carrier strike groups. The nuclear-powered aircraft carrier can carry up to 80 combat fighters and aircraft and a crew of more than 5,000. The defense contingency measures come amid concerns expressed by the American media about the growing possibility of the North's missiles reaching the US mainland. On Saturday, the Wall Street Journal remarked on the North's fast-paced nuclear development, saying that, quote, the rogue regime will soon have an arsenal that can hit Chicago. The New York Times also highlighted the dangers, suggesting that the North will have the know-how to develop a nuclear warhead by the year 2020.
The scream of sirens, the scramble to find survivors. These are the images from 5 years of conflict in Syria. A ceasefire is set to take effect Monday at sundown. But over the weekend, a monitoring group said a surge of airstrikes on rebel-held areas left at least 90 people dead and scores more wounded. Rebels fought back, shelling government-held areas. A February ceasefire collapsed within weeks, and fighting escalated throughout the summer. What's different about the latest agreement is that the U.S. and Russia can continue to strike terror groups like ISIL and al-Qaeda-linked militias. The U.S. Secretary of State warned opposition fighters to cut ties to those terror groups as soon as possible.
If groups within the legitimate opposition want to retain their legitimacy, they need to distance themselves in every way possible from Nusra and Daesh. And we expect that Russia will ensure that the Syrian government will adhere to all of its requirements about its air activities and about the access for humanitarian deliveries.
Meantime, the Turkish military says its warplanes have killed 20 ISIL fighters in northern Syria, while the Turkish president reiterated his commitment to eliminate ISIL, also known as Daesh, in Syria.
It is our primary duty to our people to defeat Daesh in Syria and prevent it from staging attacks in Turkey.
President Erdogan also pledged to deepen his crackdown on Kurdish militant groups. Last month, Turkish forces crossed into Syria, moving against ISIL, but also pushing back the advances of Syrian Kurdish fighters. Turkey views them as an extension of the PKK, the Kurdish rebel group that has waged a 30-year insurgency inside Turkey. In the midst of so many tangled alliances, competing interests, and unrelenting death and destruction, there's hope that battle-weary Syrians are willing to lay down their arms and give the ceasefire a fighting chance.
The Saudi-backed terrorist group of Ahrar al-Sham has rejected a U.S.-Russian brokered ceasefire deal to halt fighting in Syria. The terrorists announced the decision in a video statement released hours before the truce deal was due to go into effect. They claim the deal would only help reinforce the Syrian government and increase the suffering of civilians. The group is one of the largest terrorist groups operating in Syria and is mostly active in the country's northwest. It is closely affiliated with the Nusra Front, which has recently renamed itself to Jabhat Fateh al-Sham. Russia has been trying to add Jaish al-Islam and Ahrar al-Sham to the United Nations list of terrorist groups over their ties to al-Qaeda and Daesh, but the U.S. refuses to designate the militants as terrorist groups.
It's a sight relatively few people in the world ever see, the eruption of a volcano. This one occurred on the French island of Réunion in the Indian Ocean. A group of French tourists happened to be hiking nearby when it happened, and it left them entranced.
It's magical. We've been here since 8:30 this morning watching the eruption with wonder. It's unexpected. We've never seen this before, and maybe I'll never see it again.
It was the second eruption this year for the Piton de la Fournaise, which spewed molten lava up to 30 meters into the air.
We saw a cloud of smoke that began to rise on the left side. Then a small explosion, and straight away the lava started.
The Piton de la Fournaise is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. Thousands flock to Reunion Island each year to admire the spectacle. This eruption posed no threat to residents, but it did prompt authorities to shut down some nearby hiking trails because of harmful gases and high temperatures.
Blinding rain. That's what you were greeted with earlier in the day across places like Portland, Maine. And you also had so many trees coming down, unfortunately, onto homes and vehicles and power lines across sections of Massachusetts and Vermont. So many places across New England got hit very hard. There were thousands upon thousands of power outages. We certainly hope that you've gotten back online.
Singapore confirms 14 new cases of Zika virus infection. The Ministry of Health and the National Environment Agency said in a joint statement the total number of Zika infections in the country is now 318. They also report 9 of the newly reported cases are linked to infected clusters. 1 case is from a new cluster and the other 4 have no known links to any existing cluster.
If you had to guess, what part of the world would you say is most distrustful of vaccines? The Americas? Maybe Southeast Asia? Nope, it's Europe. A study that surveyed nearly 66,000 people from 67 countries found that Europeans, and especially the French, are very distrustful of vaccines. In most countries, about 90% of the people surveyed agreed that vaccines are important for children. Most people surveyed in France didn't doubt the importance of vaccines for children, but safety was a different story. 41% said vaccines aren't safe for anyone. That's more than 3 times the global average. Bosnia, Russia, Mongolia, and Greece rounded out the top 5 countries that are most distrustful of vaccine safety. So why is Europe, and especially France, so skeptical of vaccine safety? Well, the study's lead author told NPR in France in recent years there have been a series of vaccine controversies that have eroded trust. For instance, there have been concerns that hepatitis B vaccines could cause multiple sclerosis, but the World Health Organization says there's nothing to worry about. This isn't the first time doctors and researchers have seen vaccine fears play out like this. Something similar happened after a 1998 study seemed to suggest a connection between vaccines and childhood autism.
Questions over Hillary Clinton's health have sprung up once again after she appeared to faint in New York. The personal doctor of the Democratic presidential candidate has tied her sudden departure from a 911 ceremony to a pneumonia diagnosis made last Friday. In a statement Sunday, Hillary Clinton's physician Lisa Bardack said Clinton has been diagnosed with pneumonia some 48 hours earlier after suffering from a prolonged cough. Earlier in the day, the Democratic presidential nominee had been taken ill at a memorial for the victims of the 9/11 attacks in New York. Video taken by a bystander showed Clinton being pulled into her vehicle by her support staff after appearing to collapse. Her campaign spokesman said afterwards that Clinton felt overheated and was taken to her daughter's Manhattan apartment. Leaving a few hours later, Clinton claimed she was feeling much better.
How are you feeling, Secretary Clinton? Great. Great. What happened? Just a second, give us a little statement. It's a beautiful day in New York.
Dr. Bardack said that since the pneumonia diagnosis, Clinton has been put on antibiotics and advised to rest and modify her schedule. The Republican nominee Donald Trump has repeatedly raised questions about Clinton's health and whether she had the stamina to serve as president. Clinton's medical history and current health status have been a matter of debate for years. She has been treated for several illnesses in the past, including a blood clot in her head in late 2012.